Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I'm going to talk to you about the books that made me. It is getting close to the holidays and so I've started shopping for gifts for all of the people in my life, including some of the young people in my life, either my cousin's children or my best friend's children. And I love shopping for children's books. They're always so cute. And so that's also gotten me reflecting on, well, what books did I love when I was a child that might also appeal to these children? So I thought I would walk you through my children's books that I loved enough to keep these many years later and see if you also loved any of these books as a child, or if you are intrigued by these books, that you could purchase them for any small people in your life. So this is one of the bookshelves in my office where I have mostly children's books that I loved as a child, obviously. Well, not obviously, anyone can enjoy children's books. So we go from the top all the way down to the bottom. So I'm going to take you through shelf by shelf. And we're going to start at the top. So across the top, I'm not going to say a lot about a lot of these because they were featured in my Jane Austen fiction video. These were series that were far too long to fit on my adult bookshelves, so I found them a space in here. So I have the Fitzwilliam Darcy trilogy there in the corner, the Jane Austen Mysteries by Stephanie Barron, and the Mr. and Mrs. Darcy Mysteries by Carrie Bebris, and then one or two children's books themed around Jane Austen that I stuck there at the end. I won't say too much more about those, but I will link my Jane Austen fiction video down below so you can hear more. Then coming over to this side, I won't be able to pull these books out because my tripod is not tall enough, so I need both hands to hold this up to film. But I will narrate you through the books. I have some of my young adult books here that I read when I was on the younger end of young adult, so I kept them in this room. They are The Princess Diaries by Meg Cabot. Strangely enough, I preferred the films to these books. Maybe I was just too young when I read them, I don't know, but I kept the first just for nostalgia's sake. The Goose Girl and Enna Burning by Shannon Hale were fabulous. I loved them. I had never heard the original fairy tale of the Goose Girl, but these books were so good. I absolutely loved them. Then I have Aragon and Eldest by Christopher Paolini. This is as far as I made it in the Inheritance series. I enjoyed the first two, but I kind of lost interest by the time the last two were published. But I was able to meet Christopher Paolini when I was 13 when Eldest was published. So that copy is in fact signed. Then I have Witch Child and Sorceress by Celia Reese, which were amazing. They are the stories of outsiders in their various communities, Witch Child being the story of a girl who may or may not be a witch in Puritan New England. Then on that top shelf begin my classic children's books. And again, it is too tall for my tripod to go up there, so I'm going to bring the books down to you all. The first book there is Fairy Tales of England, and I have no idea who wrote this, but this was my father's favorite children's book growing up, and it was one of few he owned and the only one he saved, and it was our favorite thing to read together. My two favorite stories from this collection were Cap o' Rushes, which is sort of a combination of Cinderella and King Lear, and The Country Bumpkin, otherwise known as Stupid Boy in our house, as that is the refrain. Jack is a country bumpkin who keeps trying to do good things for people, but making a mess of them along the way, at which point he is told, "Stupid boy! You should have done this." And he keeps trying and keeps failing, but he always ends up falling on his feet in the end. I also have Eight Cousins, or The Ant Hill by Louisa May Alcott, which I loved. It's the story of Rose going to stay with her cousins, who are all extremely proud of their Scottish heritage, and quite honestly, that was the bit that I loved more than anything. A collection of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales, which belonged to my mother, and Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, which was also my mother's copy growing up. Next, I have The Wizard of Oz by Frank L. Baum. This was also my mother's copy. Mad About Madeline, which is the complete collection of Madeline stories by Ludwig Bemelmans. Next, I have the entire Paddington series, which is 14 books in total with a couple extras. They are A Bear Called Paddington, More About Paddington, Paddington Helps Out, Paddington Abroad. This was one of my particular favorites, along with A Bear Called Paddington. Paddington at Large, Paddington Marches On, Paddington at Work, Paddington Goes to Town, Paddington Takes the Air, Paddington Takes to TV, Paddington on Top, Paddington Takes the Test, Paddington Here and Now. This one lost its dust jacket. Paddington Races Ahead, Love from Paddington, and Paddington's Finest Hour. This was the last book that Michael Bond wrote in 2017. I also have a couple of supplementary Paddington books, such as Paddington and the Marmalade Maze for younger readers, Paddington at the Tower, again for younger readers, and A Bear Called Paddington in German, which I found at the Teddy Bear Museum in Munich. The Secret Garden, A Little Princess, and Little Lord Fauntleroy, all by Frances Hodgson Burnett, which I've never actually read Little Lord Fauntleroy, but I have read the other two. Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. These were my mother's editions. Basically, any naked hardback edition is probably my mother's. Great Illustrated Classics, The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. I had a great number of books in this series, so you'll see a few more throughout this tour. But they were classic books that were then simplified for children and illustrated. So this is, of course, The Three Musketeers, which I have not read the adult version, but I do want to at some point. The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, Grimm's Fairy Tales, The Secret of the Old Clock, The Bungalow Mystery, and The Case of the Vanishing Veil, all by Carolyn Keene, The Jungle Books by Rudyard Kipling, Volumes 1 and 2, Pippi Longstocking by Astrid Lindgren, Winnie the Pooh, The House at Pooh Corner, When We Were Very Young, and Now We Are Six by A.A. Milne. I then have a few Winnie the Pooh extras, such as Winnie the Pooh in German, also from the Teddy Bear Museum in Munich, and Winnie the Pooh in Scots, which I found in the gift shop at Culloden Moor, of all places. I also have the Pooh Party Book by Virginia Ellison, which is how to throw a Winnie the Pooh themed party, and it has some of the cutest ideas, so of course I saved it. Robin Hood of Sherwood Forest by Anne McGovern, along with the great illustrated classics The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle. We then have two more great illustrated classics of Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott and Heidi by Joanna Spyri, which I think I read once, but it didn't make a great impression on me. The All of a Kind Family by Sydney Taylor, which I have never seen anyone else talk about, so let me know down below if you've read them. This is a book about a large family who grows up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, I believe. And they're a Jewish family at the turn of the century, and all of the scrapes that the daughters get into, such as returning a lost library book, having to do your chores, celebrating Sukkot, all sorts of wonderful things. I loved this series, and I only have the first one. So if you also read these, let me know. I would love to meet a kindred spirit. The Great Illustrated Classics, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, Charlotte's Web by E.B. White, and finally, Little House in the Big Woods, Little House on the Prairie, and On the Banks of Plum Creek by Laura Ingalls Wilder. We then come down a shelf, which is a mix of things that I read mostly in middle school. So I guess they would be middle grade then. I'm always unsure of exactly what parameters middle grade covers. But we begin with my Harry Potter collection. So I, of course, have the entire set of American books, which is very special because these are the ones I collected as they were published, well, especially 4 onwards. I also have a copy of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which was used for my children's literature class when I studied in Bath. So, of course, I brought that home with me. I also have the Tales of Beedle the Bard, and the original American editions, at least I think they're the original American editions, of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them and Quidditch Through the Ages, which were published for Comic Relief in the early 2000s. I know there are prettier editions out there in the world, but my particular favorite thing about these books is the fact that in these editions, they've got scribbles all through them, supposedly by Harry, Ron, and Hermione, as if they were making notes in the margins. And yes, you can see my 5th grade handwriting over there on the other side. More recently, I also bought A Journey Through a History of Magic, which is a tour of the exhibition that was done at the British Library recently. Next, we move into 2 other series that I absolutely loved in middle school. The first is the Girls of Many Lands series, which was put out by American Girl for older readers from, say, 11 to 13, which focused on a different girl from a different country in a different historical period. Isabel Taking Wing from London in 1592, Cecile Gates of Gold at Versailles in 1711, Layla the Black Tulip in Istanbul in 1720, Saba Under the Hyena's Foot in Ethiopia in 1846, Spring Pearl the Last Flower in Canton, China in 1857, Minuk Ashes in the Pathway in a Yupik Eskimo village in 1890, Kathleen the Celtic Knot in Dublin in 1937. This was my particular favorite as it featured an Irish dancer, and I was myself. And Neela Victory Song in Bengal, India in 1939. We then have the Royal Diaries series, which was a spin-off of the Dear America series, which took famous female rulers throughout history and imagined what their diaries may have looked like when they were young teenagers. So of that series, I have Anastasia of Russia, Catherine the Great, also of Russia, Cleopatra of Egypt, Eleanor of Aquitaine, Empress Elizabeth of Austria, Elizabeth I of England, Isabel of Spain, Jahanara of India, Kaiulani, the last Queen of Hawaii, King Christina of Sweden, the Lady of Chiaokuo of southern China, Marie Antoinette of France, Mary, Queen of Scots, Sondok of Korea, Queen Victoria of England, and Weetamoo of the Pocasset tribe of New England. Next, I move into some middle grade and more elementary books as well, starting with the Dear America series, the original from which the Royal Diaries came. I have a couple of my favorites, although there were many, many, many books in this series. The ones that I loved and kept were A Journey to the New World, the diary of Remember Patience Whipple of the Mayflower in 1620, Standing in the Light, the Captive Diary of Catherine Carey Logan from Pennsylvania in 1763, Across the Wide and Lonesome Prairie, the Oregon Trail Diary of Hattie Campbell in 1847, So Far From Home, the Diary of Mary Driscoll, an Irish mill girl in Lowell, Massachusetts in 1847, When Will This Cruel War Be Over, the Civil War Diary of Emma Simpson in Gordonsville, Virginia in 1864, My Heart Is on the Ground, the Diary of Nanny Little Rose, a Sioux girl at the Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania in 1880, my particular favorite, Dreams in the Golden Country, The Diary of Zipporah Feldman, a Jewish immigrant girl in New York City in 1903, and Survival in the Storm, the Dust Bowl Diary of Grace Edwards from Dallert, Texas in 1935. Next, I have a couple of books by Beverly Cleary, including Henry and Beezus, Ramona the Pest, Ramona the Brave, Ramona and Her Father, Ramona and Her Mother, Beezus and Ramona, and Ramona's World, which made a big splash when it was published in 2000, as I think the series had been being published since the 60s or the 70s. And next I have some wonderful fantasy books for younger readers, such as Half Magic by Edward Eager. They're fantasy but also very funny. Its sequel, Magic by the Lake, and Knight's Castle. Then I have two of my favorite books that I haven't heard anything about on BookTube, which are The Last of the Really Great Whangdoodles and Mandy by Julie Andrews Edwards. Yes, that Julie Andrews of Mary Poppins and the Sound of Music. She wrote 2 children's books, and they are really, really wonderful. The Last of the Really Great Whangdoodles is the story of 3 siblings who meet Professor Savant, who encourages them to come to a fantastical land to help him find the last of the really great Whangdoodles, because people have stopped believing in them, so the Whangdoodles have started disappearing. So it is their job to save him, but they must do so by learning to see things in a completely different way. Whereas Mandy has much more the Secret Garden vibes of Mandy, a young girl living in an orphanage, who one day manages to climb over the wall and discovers a cottage that she can make her own world. I then have a few more middle grade books, such as Hope's Crossing by Joan Elizabeth Goodman, about a young girl who is taken captive in Connecticut by the Tories after her father leaves home to fight in the Revolutionary War, and her and an old woman that she finds trying to help her make her way back home. Nori Ryan's Song by Patricia Riley Giff about the Irish potato famine, The Great Red Wall Feast, and Rackety Tam by Brian Jacques? I've heard both and I'm not sure which is correct. I loved the Red Wall series, but I only kept this book because, let's face it, it has a squirrel wearing a kilt. That is too cute. The Quest of the Fair Unknown by Gerald Morris. Gerald Morris writes retellings of Arthurian legends for children that are absolutely hilarious. Not quite Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but a very similar style. I loved these books. I have not been able to collect them yet, but my favorite growing up was The Knight, the Damsel, and the Dwarf? Something along those lines. I'll put the correct title up here on the screen, but they are amazing. Great for readers of any age. I then have books that my mother absolutely loved growing up, which are the Henry Reed series by Keith Robertson. This was a series about Henry Reed, who's the son of diplomats, so he's always living all over the world, but every summer his parents always send him home to live with his aunt and uncle in Grover's Corner, New Jersey. And all of the adventures that he and his friend Midge, who lives down the road, get up to. So here we have Henry Reed Incorporated and Henry Reed's Babysitting Service. I then have the poetry collection Falling Up by Shel Silverstein, who is a noted American poet. Did you also know Shel Silverstein wrote country music songs? I didn't until very recently, when I watched the Ken Burns documentary about country music. And who of my generation didn't read a few of the Series of Unfortunate Events series? I did not finish it, although I did read up to book 11. And I own The Bad Beginning, The Reptile Room, The Slippery Slope, and The Grim Grotto.